You select anything else?
I thought I lost the clicker for a second. Great start. Hi guys, welcome. Thank you guys for being here today. This is a kind of what I would call an emerging topic in real estate, even though some of us have been doing these for several years. Airbnb, VRBO, there's several other vendors out there, so we're not going to play favorites with one over necessarily another one. This has been something I've been making money with as an agent, and my clients have been making money with as investors and homeowners for several years. So it is now something that other, the National Association of Realtors has taken notice of. There's actually a designation now from the National Association of Realtors called RSPS. I'll talk to you guys about that a little bit more later. I think there's about a dozen of us now in Chicago that have that designation. This class tonight is just going to be probably 15-20 minutes of conversation about what specifically you can do to get more clients that are interested in the short-term rentals. And once you have clients that are interested in them, what you can do for them, what you can't do, some pluses and minuses. So there's going to be some good conversation here with the PowerPoint I put together. And then also, in addition, I think this panel they've got put together after this will be fantastic as well. So let's go ahead and kind of dive right in here. First thing, how did I get into short-term rentals? First of all, some of my traditional buyer and seller clients, they wanted a second vacation home. Some of you are dual licensed. Where's Lana in the room? Lana's there towards the back. She's licensed in both Indiana and Illinois. I'm triple licensed in Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois. Some of us just have clients that say, hey, I want to drive about an hour, hour and a half, get out of the city, look at beautiful Lake Michigan, maybe be on a farm, someplace that's not the city limits, that's not the concrete jungle that we're here in right now. Conversely, there are people that have a beautiful house in the suburbs. They want to come into the city and enjoy the art, the museums, the Cubs, the White Sox, whoever, and have all this stuff going on around them, but yet not live only in the city. So there's this idea of a second vacation home, but a lot of these people aren't going to use it all 52 weeks of the year. They're not going to use it 365 days of the year. So what happened a couple years ago? Airbnb, VRBO, all these other short-term rental companies came out. And at that point, a lot more people started opening to the idea of, hey, I can have a second property. Maybe I use it 52 weeks a year, but maybe I don't. And if I don't, what can they do to get some extra rental income out of it? So that's traditionally what has happened to a lot of my vacation properties. They became short-term rentals because my clients weren't using them 365 days a year. Some of my other clients, they already were in their home full-time, they were using it as their primary residence, but they became consultants, or they already were consultants. A lot of us here in the city, we have clients that are consultants. They're gone 4 or 5 days a week, or they're gone weeks or months at a time. I have a client that bought a beautiful single-family home in Lakeview. They loved it, they were so happy there, and all of a sudden their work situation changed. And they go, this is a waste to have this big giant house sitting there empty, when I bet there would be people that are interested in renting it. And all of a sudden this became a very valuable investment property for them. So that type of situation happens as well. And then finally, there became what we have the last 2 years, where people started hearing that their neighbors was making good money doing this and go, wait a second, I want a short-term rental property from day one, that it wasn't an accidental short-term rental property because they owned a vacation property they weren't using very much, or they bought a home that they weren't in as much because of a work situation or family situation. There are people now buying specifically to be short-term rental investment property owners. So this is an opportunity for you as an agent to get in on this, or you as an investor to get in on this, but you've got to understand the rules of the game. So what are the benefits of short-term rentals? Well, first of all, you can potentially, and remember, we are not stockbrokers, and if we were, we'd still have to use these same little disclosures that this is, past results or no indication of future results, blah, blah, blah. We get all that. However, there is the potential for our clients, and for us, those of us that are clients, to make more rental income per month, and therefore better net operating income and return on investment than traditional 12-month leases. That's what's getting a lot of people into this. I have a client who lives near Wrigley Field. bought a condominium in a building that allows Airbnb rentals. We'll talk about condominium associations later. And they were gonna be able to get about $1,500 a month for the property because it wasn't that great of a property. It was a garden level unit. Because it's near Wrigley Field, sometimes they're able to get more than $800 a night on a hot night in prime Cubs season. So do the math on that. All of a sudden, this becomes a tremendous return on investment and NOI or net operating income. So this is the type of situation we're seeing where all of a sudden this becomes much more valuable than a traditional rental. Also, it allows the owner to continue to use the property when they do want to be there. I have friends and clients that go on trips specifically because the Cubs are in town or the White Sox are in town or there's a convention going on near McCormick Place. That type of situation allows for greater flexibility, but you're not getting kicked out of your property for 12 months at a time because you want to get that rental income. It's also going to allow you, if you have kids in college, maybe this is something for now, you've got a gap period. A lot of people, they rent something out for 9 months and then it sits for 3 months vacant. This is an opportunity to fill in those gaps. So that's another benefit of these short-term rentals. The bottom line is this is more options in terms of time, flexibility, and also in terms of money. What are the drawbacks? Well, first off, intense local regulation. The experts at Trove, they are going to get into that a lot more than I am. However, I will tell you this much, it is a hot topic. It will be a hot topic. The city of Chicago, there are several different rulings out there. There's court cases out there. This is constantly changing, and that is just one city. I work in multiple cities, as do most of you. I work in 3 states. Some of you work in 2 states. This is constantly changing law. So you have to be aware as both an owner, as a realtor, not to be giving out advice that's 3 weeks or 3 months old because this stuff is constantly changing. And also realize that what you say today or what you do today as an owner or as a realtor, it may not be accurate tomorrow. So you constantly got to be watching what's going on, both locally and then obviously state and nationally. Those rules are constantly changing as far as the municipalities, but also as far as taxation as well. We had a big change in tax code last year. We are sure there's more tax code changes to come no matter what side of the fence you are on. There is also some stress to this. Now again, the gentlemen at Trove, they've come up with a great concept. It's why I'm here tonight. I think this is one of the coolest things I've seen. For my clients, that's going to take away some of the stress. However, I don't care what great company comes up with what concept, constantly having turnover, there's going to be some issues. There's going to be that surprise guest that decided to do something awful in the Airbnb or VRBO that weekend, that messed something up, that made the neighbors mad, got the police called. We've all heard those horror stories about long-term tenants. It can be even more of a colorful story when the person was only there 3 or 4 days. So there is stress to this. There's no guarantee the property is always going to rent for the high amounts or not sit vacant for periods of a time. If you are smart as an owner or as a realtor, you will download the apps from Airbnb, VRBO, etc., and start playing around on them. I just got back from a trip that was really amazing. I was an Airbnb, I was the guest along with a friend of mine. We were the 2 people that were responsible as the guests. Our host was fantastic. They left us a nice review as the guest. However, I noticed that there was a noticeable spike in the cost of the property because we rented there over, New Year's. So you're not going to always get the same rent amount I'm going to keep using this Wrigley Field example because it's an easy one for me because it's an actual client of mine. You're not going to get the same amount on a dreary Monday or Tuesday night, raining in the middle of winter in Wrigley Field, that you will in the middle of summer or fall in prime baseball season during a home game. Of course you won't. So that's the up and down. There's no guarantee that this is going to long-term be the most amazing thing ever. This has been going on for several years now, though. So we feel like these short-term rentals, we're going to talk in a moment about how they are a difference between this and a hotel. We feel like this is a trend that's going to stay, but it's not a guarantee that it will always be like this. It's like anything else in real estate and any other investment. There can be dips, ebbs, and flows. You cannot use short-term rental income with most lenders. Now, Millie's an amazing lender. I really like her, which is why I always kind of like bring her in with me on projects when I'm presenting. But there is very few or no lenders, probably no lenders that I know that you can use short-term rental income the same way you can when you're buying a building, that you can say, here's a 12-month lease, Mr. and Mrs. Lender, qualify this as part of my income. You can't do that with short-term income because what is it? It's short-term. It's not a guarantee it's gonna stay around like that. And again, there's these wild ebbs and flows that go, especially in a hot time period or when there's something going on nearby that property that makes it really attractive for a short term. What type of properties are best? A single family home, this is an ideal situation. A single family home, there's no condo association. There's no neighbor above or below you. So if you wanna have Airbnb guests and they're kind of loud, there's no complaints, because unless they're really wild people who have, I don't know what they could be doing that they're gonna disturb neighbors that don't share a wall, there's no walls to share. And that's one of the biggest issues with Airbnb, VRBO, et cetera, that I know so far from my clients, is they get complaints from neighbors that share a wall, a floor, or a ceiling. Those noise complaints are most of the issues. Very few noise complaints with a single family home. You've really got to have special people in there during that short period of time in order to get complaints at that point. So that's something nice. Also with a single family home, you're obviously going to get a yard. So if you have a Airbnb tenant that has children, that has pets, etc., this is an advantage for them. I have some short-term tenants right now in one of my clients' properties that they had a house fire. And so because they had a house fire, my client is the benefit of a wonderful resident, a wonderful short-term tenant for a couple months, while they turn around and get their house repaired. The insurance company's paying for the whole thing. My client's getting a wonderful premium over what we were getting him on a 12-month lease. And at the same time, this client had to have a single family home because they had a child, they had dogs, they had to have that single family home feel. So a single family home is a wonderful type of Airbnb or short-term rental property. A multi-unit building purchased by investor, what some of my clients are doing now, they are buying a whole building, which is wonderful because then obviously later they can turn that building into condos, they can buy and hold it and keep it as apartments forever. But what they're doing is one of the units they turn into Airbnb. There's some local regulation in Chicago and other areas that the city of Chicago doesn't want a whole building being Airbnb. So you can't buy a building, necessarily throw it up and say, guess what? All 4 units are Airbnb. The city of Chicago doesn't want that. A lot of cities and municipalities don't want that. But what they are perfectly happy with, as long as you do everything legally and the way that Trove's going to tell you a little bit later as far as filing everything, if they approve you, you can absolutely have one of your units of 3 or 4, however many in the building, be an Airbnb. So the nice thing with that, the strategy there for my clients has been that you are turning around and you're getting the solid, regular 1-year leases that you're used to that are hopefully paying you on time, and then you have one unit that goes and gets these very nice income big jumps when there's something special going on in town. If there's a neighborhood festival, if there's, again, any of these conventions, sporting athletic events, etc. There's just people that don't want to stay in a hotel. We'll talk about that in a little second as well. So these multi-unit buildings are absolutely wonderful because you can keep one unit as a short-term rental, have everything else be the traditional standard year plus lease, and you've got a solid diversification within one building of your rental income. Now, let's talk about condos a little bit. We're going to talk about them again later. Most larger condo buildings in the city of Chicago, and I get this question a lot, well, what condo buildings allow Airbnb? Very few do. And you will sit there all day and night using up your phone battery and everyone else's time trying to find condo buildings that still allow Airbnb. Most of the larger ones, almost all the buildings I know that are not self-managed, they have already put into place a ban on Airbnb. And all other short-term rentals as well. We shouldn't even name one company over another. We should just say short-term rentals are not allowed in the vast majority of condo buildings. And as probably those of us, including myself, that live in condo buildings, own there, and are on our condo boards, we probably agree with that Airbnb is not necessarily the most desirable thing for a larger condo building. So large condo buildings, we're probably going to rule them out. So that leaves single-family homes, multi-unit buildings that you buy the whole building, and then an exception to all this that I will talk to you about in a minute. What are short-term renters wanting? In other words, what should you be looking for as a realtor or as an investor? Number 1, access to public transportation, nightlife, hotspots, waterfront. Now, you can probably find in any neighborhood something that is going to attract someone, Airbnb or VRBO wise or whatever. Look on the apps and see what prices people are getting. Do some research, what's going on in that particular neighborhood. But what I will tell you is a lot of times, look at where most of the hotels are. Most of them, they're along the waterfront, they're near public transportation, they've got nightlife, they've got hotspots. People are not probably most of the time coming into a short-term rental to hide out and be extremely quiet. They're coming to experience an area or be with people That's not often that they're looking to be completely isolated from everyone else. Maybe sometimes. So you may find a corner niche market. But what my clients have made the most money with are areas that are hot, that there's things going on in them, or that there is a lack of hotels, motels, etc. around. I had one client that bought in an area that had none of this. It was nowhere near the water, it didn't have public transportation, and I go, no one's going to want to Airbnb that. And she goes, yes they will, there's no hotels around here. Because she lived in the area already, she knew what she was talking about. Made a killing with that, because there was nothing else around in terms of where people could stay. So if they didn't want to stay with a relative that happened to be in the area, but they wanted to be in that area, they had nothing going on. So the Airbnb did very well for her. Special events, sporting events, festivals, if you know of places that have a lot of that around them. So again, I don't want to pick on McCormick Place, but there's a lot going on in McCormick Place. If you don't want to stay in a hotel, you might want to consider an Airbnb or VRBO. That's a great area to do that in. Again, anywhere near any of the sports stadiums has a very, very active short-term rental property rate. Attractive finishes. This is something I get questions about quite a bit as well. People want to feel like they're in a nice property. So if you find something that needs work and you think you're going to slap a short-term rental applicant in there, it's probably not going to work. So it can be in the middle of nowhere if there's no hotels or motels around, but people still want to feel like it's a nice property. You have to do the work to make it feel at least like a decent hotel, motel scene. Here's the big difference. Here's why short-term rentals have become so popular versus a hotel or motel. You can cook your own meal, you can do your laundry, you can feel like you have a little bit of a piece of a home. That has really been successful for the short-term rental community because people don't feel and don't want to feel like they're in a hotel or motel when they're in these properties. So what does that mean? You have to have a decent kitchen and probably a washer dryer. Because again, people don't want to have to sit there and go out to eat. They don't want to have to sit there and go to a laundromat or go to pay a ton of money to have a dry cleaner do their laundry. They want to feel like they're home for even these short period of times, 2, 3, 4 days. Every Airbnb I've stayed in the last couple of years has had a dishwasher, has had a washer dryer, has had some sort of deck or balcony where you didn't feel like you were in a hotel. So that's the advantage of them, which means that's what you have to cater to if you're trying to buy this type of property. Views and outdoor space are a plus. Parking could be important for some, but not all. Most of us, if we're coming to an area, we're probably going to be flying in, maybe taking a train, etc. We don't necessarily need a car, but that could be a plus if you do find one that way. I wouldn't necessarily be looking for parking first and foremost. I'd be looking for the rest of these. Let's talk about condos. I know where there's going to be the majority of questions, so I'm going to kind of tell you what I know quickly here. With most buildings of any quality banning Airbnb and VRBO, so in other words, short-term rentals, and here's what I'm going to tell you about this, is there are definitely some buildings in Chicago that allow Airbnb or VRBO. I have a client that goes, look, I found one. You didn't know about this building. I said, I did know about that building. I wouldn't put my pet in that building. You know, there are buildings in Chicago that do allow it that also have so many other issues with their condo association. Why would you put yourself into the position of investing in that building? So you can't just say, yes, they allow short-term rentals, I'm gonna buy in that building. You need to obviously still turn around and look at the fundamentals of the building. So there's a few buildings that seem to continue to allow it. So most buildings of any substance and quality in the city of Chicago have banned short-term rentals. Therefore, what can you do if you do not want to buy a single-family home or do not want to buy a multi-unit building, AKA you don't live here and you don't want to be worrying about lawn maintenance, roof maintenance, etc. This has been a very big portion of my business with the short-term rentals is people that come in and they say, Nick, I want a property here. I do not want to have to worry about the yard. I do not want to have to worry about exterior maintenance. And I said, well, then we'll just buy a building and have someone manage it for you. And they said, well, that's really not in my budget. I'm going, okay, great. So what are we going to do? Here's what I do that I'm going to recommend to you that are in the room or watching online, is that this has been a very effective strategy for me. I find a small 2 to 4 unit self-managed building. A small 2 to 4 unit self-managed building. Why self-managed? Because there's no condo manager to get in the way. The condo managers automatically are not going to want to deal with Airbnb and VRBO and short-term rentals. They know noise complaints and that kind of stuff come from that. Therefore, they're gonna go, ooh, I don't want that. I'm gonna make sure that the condo association either never sees this proposition or that we've already banned it. Because the condo managers, God bless them, they already have a bad job. That's a tough job to be a condo building manager. I have friends that do that. They don't wanna be involved with this stuff, so they're gonna block it. So you need to find a small 2 to 4 unit self-managed building where probably the owner of the unit that's for sale is gonna be on the condo board. Because there's only, what, 2 to 4 units? 3 to 4 positions on the board, they're gonna be on their board most likely, which means they're gonna be able to have the sellers or the other owners in the building listen to them when they bring forward the following proposition. And this is the language that I've used multiple times to get deals done in little buildings so that you can have your client buy and safely get an Airbnb or VRBO property. I write up an offer on a property that's for sale, a condo that's for sale in one of these small buildings. These, again, 2 to 4 unit, self-managed buildings, quote unquote. Now, this is my language. You can use whatever language you want, consult with an attorney, etc. This is what I came up with. It's worked, and my attorneys seem to like the language. Subject to buildings condo association passing an amendment to the bylaws or rules and regulations specifically allowing short-term rentals such as VRBO and Airbnb. I'm going to repeat that again. I write up the offer on a suitable condo in such buildings subject to, so this is the exact language I'm using, subject to buildings condo association passing an amendment to the bylaws or rules and regulations specifically allowing short-term rentals such as VRBO and Airbnb. So see, if my mom is watching this, I have used my law degree that I never use for approximately 2 seconds in a public presentation. Here's why I named these 2 specific vendors, even though I just told you guys that I don't want to talk about them too much, because I want there to be no question what we're trying to address here. I want all the other unit owners in the building, all 2 to 4 of them, to understand what we're trying to do. I don't want to be shady. I don't want my client to waste their time. I want everybody to be on the same page. Like, look, we are trying to get this unit in order to Airbnb or VRBO the little sucker out. And then therefore, that homeowners association has a decision. Now, I've written this offer up many times, and sometimes it's immediate. Even the owner does, like, I'm not even taking that back to my association. These guys are my friends. And other times they go, I'm going to take it back to my association because I know somebody else in the building is already secretly Airbnb or VRBing all the place out. Or I'm going to take this back to the association because I want out of here. And these guys seem like they're good neighbors. We've been good friends. They might want to do this with their unit later. So depending on the makeup of the building, depending on who's already in the building, this may go over great or may go over by lead balloon. You have no idea. But if you don't do it this way, and you're going to sit there on the phone and go, does the building allow Airbnb? Most small buildings don't have the expertise or were drafted their rules and regulations before any of this stuff was in place. So they're not going to have that information. They're not going to have any of this language. They're not going to know what to do with it. I don't want my client, we'll take questions at the end, I don't want my client to go into a situation where there is no clause there. So I know some agents that are like, oh, there's no clause in that association. I'm just going to have my client buy it, and they can hope for the best. And then the minute the client starts to do this short-term rental, the condo association votes against it or puts something into place that hurts the client. I don't want that for my client. So this protects your client because right on the way in, this language has to be passed by the board so that specifically your client can do this. I was very, very clear about that for every single one of the ones I've written up so that my clients are protected. Okay? So that is what's been successful. And from there on, it's a happy, harmonious condo association conversation. Obviously, later on, that condo association with my client on the board in these small buildings can do what they want as conversations continue. Obviously, if they just turned around and voted for this, and then my client's on the board later on because the board is so small, the odds of this being overturned later are very slim, unless there's some sort of dramatic seat change or issue, which my client then has plenty of time to get out of the building. So we have kind of an exit strategy there for my client. All right, let's move on to taxing and finance considerations. If you are calling this property a second or vacation home, like some of my clients do, the benefit of that is that you get the potential for 10% down financing. So, and Millie can talk to you about this all day. A second home or a vacation home, you have the opportunity to do 10% financing versus 20% down plus for an investment property. There's something called the 14-day rental rule you need to be aware of. If the property is owner-occupied part-time and rented for 14 days or less per year, then the owner's not required to report that rental income to the IRS. Now, why is that important? For those of us that live, again, near Wrigley Field, Sox Park, or whatever they're calling it this month, etc. All of that stuff, we as owners can live in the property, call it our primary residence or our second residence, and for as long as it's, what is it? 14 days or less per year, we can rent that little sucker out on Cubs home games, etc., and not report that income legally. We don't have to report that income to the IRS. So that is something to think about for people that are doing a second home and are going to use it the vast majority of time, but have little opportunities, little spurts here and there. You ever been to Saugatuck Douglas in Michigan, some of the other those beautiful resort areas, New Buffalo, where there's people with Chicago license plates up there all year except what? Memorial Day, Labor Day, July 4th weekend, and maybe one or two other ones. That's what they're doing. They're getting it underneath the 14 days, but those big major holidays, they're raking in the money on those big major holidays. I know people that make almost enough to cover about 6 months of their mortgage by doing just those major holidays. That is smart money, and the rest of the time, when it's not crazy and the town isn't full of people like me ruining the Airbnbs, that you can actually have a wonderful time in there. The town is pretty quiet. If it's rented over 14 days, so most of my clients, what they do rent it over 14 days, but they do live in it sometimes, then what's going to happen is all the rental income must be reported and deductible expenses prorated between the time you rent it and the time that you have personal use. So you've really got to keep track of that. And especially now with the fact that all of these websites you're using track what's going on in the property in terms of, you really can't lie about it. You're number one, you're checking into these places on social media. IRS has social media, don't lie. You've got to do this proration between the days that you're keeping it as a rental versus the days that you're using it yourself. The IRS allows you mortgage interest deduction. I did not know this. This is part of the course, the RSPS course. IRS allows mortgage interest deduction on two residences, up to $750,000, and that is primary and one additional, but only if the residence is not rented out for more than 14 days. So again, that goes back to the equation of people racing in, getting the prime days rented out, and all the rest of the time they're using it for themselves. They want to be able to use the mortgage interest deduction that is still, at this point, it's $750,000. That used to be $1 million, now it's down to this. That may change again as well. If rented more than 14 days, the mortgage interest can be deducted as an expense on your profit and loss statement when you're doing that with the IRS. Okay, I went a little bit over my time. I've got a couple more things though to show you. One of the best resources I found, the Realtors Property Resource Tool, or RPR. How many guys have the app? A few of you. For everyone else, please download that because all of us paid for it in our lovely National Association of Realtors dues every year. That has really got some good investment analysis pieces to it. And by the way, not all of it's on the app. Play with that. That is a really fantastic thing whether you're representing the buyers or sellers. You go to narrpr.com to register for it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing more and more of this stuff. This little presentation will be up there in about 2 days, and there's some other stuff up there too as well. Short-term rentals are here to stay. We know they are. We want to talk more and more about them so people get into them the right way. They don't get into them the wrong way. I'm going to have some more tax analysis on that as well. I also show you on there how to do ROI, NOI, those kind of calculations. Consider taking the RSPS certification course. If we're friends on social media, you're going to see we're bringing it back to Chicago. They just did it today. Maurice Hampton did a wonderful job of doing it. I audited the class. I'm probably going to be one of the people teaching it next year locally. It's a really cool class to take. It's an easy certification to get too. And then if you want to talk to me further after this, there is going to be the panel. There'll be a Q&A, and you can also download my digital business card by texting Libert to 85377. So thank you guys very much for having me, and I will turn it over to Trove, who's going to talk to you a little bit more.
And so we'll save the questions for Nick until the very end for the Q&A. I know you guys probably have questions about the specifics. Obviously, you can get Nick's digital business card, but we'll save all the questions for the panel at the end, so we can just ask them all at once. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. For the main show,